All right, we're about to dive into numbers so huge they feel like they should break reality. And our guide for this little trip into the infinite? Well, it's George Gamow's amazing book 123 Infinity. He uses these incredible stories to really stretch the limits of what our brains can handle.
But hey, before we get started, take a second and really think about that question. I'm not talking about the biggest number you can write. I mean, what's the largest quantity you can honestly picture in your head? Because that struggle, that feeling of your brain just short-circuiting, that's exactly what we're digging into today.
So, Gamow kicks things off with this hilarious story. Picture this. Two Hungarian aristocrats decide to have a contest to see who can name the biggest number. After a few minutes of some serious, hardcore thinking, one of them finally has a breakthrough. He proudly announces the biggest number he can possibly think of, 3. And look, that's not just a silly joke, right? It actually gets at something really fundamental about how our brains are wired and how we see the world.
I mean, think about it. We can all write a 1 with 100 zeros after it, no problem. But actually understanding what that means, that's a whole different ballgame. Our brains, they evolved to count stuff we can actually see, like how many berries are on this bush, or how many wolves are over there. When you get to a number that big, it just becomes a symbol. It's totally disconnected from anything real.
Okay, let's really dig into this with maybe the most famous story about how sneaky big numbers can be. It's the classic tale of a clever inventor and a king who was about to get a masterclass in what we call exponential growth. So the legend goes like this. The Grand Vizier, a guy named Sissa ben Dahir, invents the game of chess for his king. The king is so thrilled, he tells him, name your price. Anything you want. The vizier's request sounds incredibly modest. He just wants 1 single grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains on the second, 4 on the third, you see where this is going, just doubling it for every square.
The king, he's loving this new game. He probably has a good laugh at what sounds like such a tiny, almost insulting request. So, of course, he agrees immediately. What's a few handfuls of wheat for such an amazing invention?
And yeah, at first, it's nothing, totally manageable. By the time you get to the end of that first row, the 8th square, you're only at 256 grains. That's barely a handful. The king's probably sitting there feeling pretty smug about the deal he just made.
But this is where that innocent little doubling, what mathematicians call a geometric progression, starts to show its teeth. Because by the time you hit the 24th square, that debt has just exploded. We're talking over 8 million grains. All of a sudden, the king's accountants are starting to sweat. The royal granaries are looking not so full anymore.
And by the time they get to that final 64th square, the total number is, well, it's just staggering. 18 quintillion and change. It's a number so big it doesn't even feel real. The king wasn't just in debt anymore. He owed a debt that was bigger than his entire reality.
Okay, to put that into perspective for you, that's more wheat than the entire world would produce for the next 2,000 years. Yeah, with one silly-sounding promise, this king didn't just bankrupt his kingdom, he bankrupted the entire planet for millennia.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. That exact same mind-bogglingly huge number, it actually shows up in a completely different ancient Indian legend, one that's maybe even more mind-bending.
This is the legend of the Tower of Brahma. The story says that in the great temple at Benares, there's this tower made of 64 delicate golden discs. Each one is a different size, and they're all stacked up on one of 3 diamond needles.
So the local priests have this sacred job. They have to move the entire stack of discs from the first needle to the third one. But there are rules. You can only move 1 disc at a time, and you can never place a larger disc on top of a smaller one. And the prophecy? Well, the legend says that when they finally finish moving all 64 discs, the world will literally end.
So the big question is, what's the minimum number of moves it would take to solve this puzzle? Well, it turns out to be 2 to the power of 64 minus 1. Does that number sound familiar? It should. It is the exact same number as the grains of wheat on the chessboard. Okay, so if the legend is true, how long are we going to have to wait for the world to end? How long would it take these priests to finish the job?
Well, let's pretend these priests are absolute machines. They make one perfect move every single second. No breaks, no sleep, no mistakes, 24/7. Even working at that impossible speed, it would still take them 58,000 billion years.
And that just shows you the insane scale we're talking about.
Back when Gamow wrote this book, scientists figured the whole universe was about 3 billion years old. So the time it would take to solve this puzzle is thousands of times longer than the entire lifespan of the cosmos. I think it's safe to say the world isn't ending anytime soon because of this. All right, for our last story, we're going to take this idea of huge numbers and push it even further into the world of philosophy and what it even means to create something.
So Gamow wants us to imagine a machine. It's an automatic printing press, right? And it has wheels with every letter, every number, every symbol you can think of. And its only job is to print out every single possible combination of those characters, one after another, forever.
Now, obviously, most of what this thing prints is going to be total nonsense. Just random strings of letters and symbols, complete gibberish. But, and this is the part that'll mess with your head, because it's printing every single possible combination, it has to, eventually, print everything meaningful too. Every poem, every song, every book ever written. Somewhere in that endless stream of nonsense is the complete works of Shakespeare, word for word, comma for comma.
And it doesn't stop with things that have already been written. No way. It would also print the future. Somewhere in there, you'd find tomorrow's newspaper, the winning lottery numbers for next week, the cure for cancer, the greatest love letters and novels that haven't even been thought of yet.
And that leaves us with this really deep final question. If every story, every scientific discovery, every piece of music, if it all already exists out there as just a mathematical possibility waiting in a sea of gibberish, then what does it really mean to create something? It's a pretty wild thought, and it all comes from just trying to wrap our tiny brains around the strange and beautiful world of really, really big numbers.